after 1945, the British state becomes even more larger and more influential on the British people's daily lives. There's a huge nationalisation programme that takes place in post-war Labour government between 1945 and 1951. Industries, coal, railways, they all come under state ownership. And there's a huge transfer of the workforce from the private sector into the public sector. This is sort of all part of this rebuilding of Britain after the destruction of both wars, really, the First World War and the Second World War. And so it means that a new sort of world is looking to be created here. New institutions get created, such as the National Health Service. Again, that came out of a lot of independent hospitals, local authority hospitals. There wasn't much new building, it was just all taken over and put into the state. And a national health service was created from that. So these sort of national bodies get created under the British state. There was a need for forms of international cooperation, and that went back to the Victorian times, the 19th century. But we are now talking about some pretty fundamental changes in the psychology of how peoples are governed. There's been therefore a sort of an undermining of the nation state and national identity as a consequence of this desire to find an alternative to the nation states and the risk of further war. And this has sort of manifested itself in organisations like the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization. In Europe, of course, is the EU, which until recently Britain was part of. These are international organisations that seek to bring a wider stability across a range of different nation states. Now, from Britain's perspective, and particularly England's perspective, there is a very long history, over 1,000 years, of Britain being, or England being, a nation state. And for most of that period, it's been pretty successful and prosperous and has brought about some of the ideas that have led to greater prosperity around the world. Industrialization, improvements in medicine, all of these things led to improvements for a greater number of people than just the people in Britain. So there is an issue here of throwing the baby out with the bathwater in terms of saying, there needs to be alternatives to the nation state. I'd argue that the English nation state has been actually quite successful. This has been the heart, I think, of the political battlefield in the post-war period. There's been this tension between the English people in particular and their belief in national sovereignty, and a view amongst political groups, particularly international political groups, who want to see international forms of government as a way of averting any future conflicts.